So James and I, James and everyone in the DevOps community have been working together for years. If you don't know James, he's head of research at Signal Sciences. Currently, he does DevOps training on lynda.com. He wrote the Gauntlet open source project for application security testing. He co-founder or helped start DevOps Days Austin, LastCon, and a whole bunch of other things on his very long resume in this DevOps community, and also was one of the original gang that started All Day DevOps with us. So, James, enough of an introduction to help us start down this path here to DevOps Enlightenment.
All right, right on. Can you hear me and see the slides okay?
I can. We're good to go.
Okay. Hey, thanks Derek for the great introduction there, and that was kind of a fun panel. And I think we'll talk about some of the things that I sort of have taken this presentation, and it's sort of me cataloging things that I've seen going on in the industry, which I think will and most of it's just from observation and rhetoric, I guess, and not as many hard stats, but hopefully it'll be helpful for y'all. So. I work over at Signal Sciences. We provide application security defense for cloud and containers and anything that's kind of delivering a web application firewall or web application. So we kind of compete against like web application firewalls and RASPs and that nature. We have some big customers from Netflix to more. I think we have a bunch on our website you can check out if you're interested. So I also do a lot of stuff at DevOps Days Austin. On lynda.com, like Derek mentioned. So, all right. So I'd like to give you guys a summary up front, and then we'll kind of unpack it from there. So I think we're seeing that DevOps is changing. We need to make sure we don't lose our way as security is kind of brought in. Another premise here is that security is in crisis, but security at forward-leaning shops have found kind of the new way, and kind of catalog those here. And so we're going to juxtapose old ways and new ways of doing security in DevOps. And I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to go a little bit fast, but I will provide the slides if you hit me an email. My email is at the end of the presentation. And so the questions I have is security, can security's industry rise to the demands and the high speed of DevOps? Is DevOps going to be able to handle all the baggage that we security people bring to the table? I don't know. I hope not. And hopefully security won't destroy the DevOps culture. But that's to be determined. We'll have to see. So first, let's start with DevSecOps deep thoughts. I thought we could define what DevSecOps means. So if anybody's familiar with Jack Handey, I borrowed this actually from DevOps deep thoughts from Josh Zimmerman. So this is a meme of a meme. So I apologize if it's not nearly as clever as the original or the subsequent version. But here we go. Maybe in order to understand DevSecOps, we have to look at the word itself. Basically, it's made up of these three separate words: de, viseco, and ps. What do these words mean? It's a mystery, and that's why so is DevSecOps. Whenever someone asks me to define DevSecOps, I usually think for a minute. Then I spin around and pin the guy's arm behind his back. Now who's asking the questions? Well, those are my attempt at comedy here. So hopefully you found those funny. But big thanks to Josh Zimmerman and of course the real Jack Handey. So and I did find this one I thought is helpful for all of us, no matter your thoughts on DevOps or DevSecOps. But many people don't realize that playing dead can help not only with bears but also at important business meetings. Okay, no truer thing, right? Okay, so I'd like to just give you my journey and just talk about like where I've been and kind of where I'm coming through and kind of the path that I've been on. So my first big company job was at a web and e-commerce company. It was doing about $1 billion in sales, and we had brutal on-call rotations. We'd had these deployment windows that were supposed to be a few hours that would end up being 24+ hours. It was all waterfall, and it was very painful. But through that adversity and problems, like we had good friendships born because we were all suffering together. In 2007, I went for a startup that was doing Amazon cloud type stuff. Then I learned a little bit about failure and happiness and how I wanted to live my life. And then I had the old team that I was working with kind of started a new initiative at the same big company, but for doing cloud back in 2010. And so I went and joined them. At the same time, we had found the DevOps message. Being in Austin, there's an early cloud camp, or I think it was an ops camp, and all of the who's who of the DevOps community today, like was there at that event, and we sort of were like, oh, this is great. We totally will do this, and we had kind of clearance to run with cloud budget, and we just sort of said, let's do DevOps as well, because that makes sense, right? And so we did infrastructure as code. We weren't doing CD at the time. That wasn't a big thing as much back then, but we were doing like daily deploys, and we were delivering value way faster than we'd ever done anywhere else inside the company. And we delivered 4 SaaS products in 2 years. And at that time, in 2011, that was like blowing people's minds inside of our big company. Around that time, I found kind of the rugged software movement. I was able to meet Gene Kim in a bar, started the Gauntlet project, and then a little bit later joined Signal Sciences. And through that time, I learned, like, and through the DevOps movement, really there needed to be a compassion for ops, because we faced this, and we just talked about this in the slide, right? You had every 10 developers, you had 1 operations person. And so you had this labor inequity, which didn't just stop there, right? It also permeated the rest of the IT ranks, and we see this with dev to ops to security, 110 to 1, right? The problem we were just talking about in the previous panel. I still kind of remained optimistic. I thought, well, security can kind of find its way, sort of like ops did, because ops sort of has had a revitalization over the last decade. And I remember our roots of friendship. So this is Patrick Dubois, who's the guy who coined the term DevOps originally. We consider him the godfather of DevOps, and also John Willis, who's no stranger to this community, but both are really instrumental in kind of building out the kind of DevOps, especially from day zero. And then I started thinking about our team that was building all these applications, these cloud apps over together at our big company, and here we all are. We met up many years later, and we were just going out for a movie. But I still remember, like, this is the type of thing that really matters to us. And Patrick Dubois said this, and I believe the year he wrote this was in 2011, 2012. There was a IT Cutter journal on DevOps succeeding in the enterprise, and Patrick Dubois was like the guest editor for it, and we had a little write-up for my good friend Ernest Muller had a write-up, and kind of our success story was in there as well. But in there it said, culture is the most important aspect to DevOps succeeding in the enterprise. And I think that we shouldn't go away from that. I think it's really easy to get stuck in the tooling and all the other stuff, and I'm going to talk about some of the ways we're seeing security progress down the path of enlightenment. But whenever we really look at it, culture, we can't leave that behind. And I sort of think about culture in a very lunar type of way. I have back when I started kind of thinking about this, I had a 3 or 4 year old daughter, and she was really excited about the moon, right? Every time we would see the moon, she'd be, Dad, there's the moon. It's full moon, half moon. I started installing apps on my phone, like, so I could tell the phases of the moon. Her window kind of would set, and we would go out there and look at it. Sometimes I'd pull her out. And I realized that I had started to change myself and my culture. The inside of my heart, I had changed, because I was driving home from a business trip once, and I called my wife, and I was like, "Hey, the moon is really, really big right now, like, and it's some phase of whatever, right?" And I said, "You need to wake up, Lydia, have her go out there and take it out and see it." And she was like, "Oh, kids are asleep, I'm not going to do that." But I was really excited about it, and I realized, like, that excitement and that had sort of infected me, and there was kind of a culture that had moved in. And so I think these are the 4 keys that I like to think of for culture. So you have mutual understanding. We started having shared language. We had shared views about what's important. The tooling, like the apps and stuff like that we'd put on our phones. So I think those are helpful ways to think about this. And we need to think about DevSecOps not as something new or some wholesale change, but it's the extension of DevOps culture into and for the inclusion of security within that. And I think that's important to get. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just bringing security in to a place where arguably they should have been all along, or kind of belonged in early on, but we sort of we didn't bring them around first go around. But I think DevSecOps is really kind of helping them get the understanding of what the DevOps movement, and that it's also includes security as well. Well, this is good, because I find that security is in crisis, and this is one of the premise of the whole talk, right? We see one of the luminaries inside of the security industry, Stephen Beloven, who wrote the famous book on firewalls in the late 90s, recently wrote a book called Thinking Security. In that, he says companies are spending a great deal on security, but we read of all these cyber-related attacks all the time, and something is wrong. The root of the problem is twofold. We're protecting the wrong things, and we're hurting productivity in the process. So not even doing the right type of work, and we're hurting the rest of the business all around. So it's a pretty bad statement for the state of security. If you like Mr. Robot, hope you do, but security, right? It's important. There's this other quote that really resonated with me in a very serious way when I read this. This is a book called The Tangled Web, Michael Zalewski. It's all about browsers and browser security and web application security. But the first chapter kind of catalogs security throughout the last 6 decades or so, and talks about how the 60s and 70s and the focus on cryptography and all that stuff. But there's a churn in the book, and it's a point in kind of the mid 90s, and he kind of makes this statement. He says, security by risk assessment introduces a dangerous fallacy that structured inadequacy is almost as good as adequacy, and that underfunded security efforts plus risk management are just about as good as properly funded security work. Now, that should bother anybody who's an engineer or a developer who has come from the idea of creating high quality code, right? Because what he's saying here is that we can write sloppy code. We can do, we don't have to do the engineering work that we used to have to do. We can just put actuarial science behind this. We can do management of risks, buy insurance policies, accept the risks or whatever, and that's just about as good. And that really hit a chord with me, and I was disturbed by the fact that that this was kind of the turn in the industry. And it really, it struck me as this is the things that I had seen throughout the industry of people doing this kind of activity and sort of giving up on the idea of higher quality, more secure type of code. And I think this is cataloged in the recently released Agile Application Security book. It says many security teams work with a worldview where their goal is to inhibit change as much as possible. And I've had this said to me where security prefers a system powered off and unplugged. So developers think that security doesn't even want systems to run. That's how disconnected from reality they are. Also, I hear security people always claiming that those stupid developers, which we just saw in the presentation for the DevSecOps report, almost 50% of developers know that security is important. They want to do something, they just don't know what to do. Well, it's not that they're stupid. It's just there's just so many paths or whatever. But we kind of have this real antagonistic relationship between security and developers. So I think security has to change or die. So I have this kind of long quote from a web application firewall vendor that I was doing some research early on in the Signal Sciences days. But the paper says every aspect of managing WAFs is an ongoing process. It's the antithesis of set it and forget it technology. It's the real point of this research is to maximize value from your WAF. You need to go in with everyone's eyes open of the effort required to get and keep the WAF running productively. They go on to say you need 1 or 2 headcount just to run the WAF. So it's a questionable piece of technology in the beginning. Now you're sinking even more money into it and services and people to keep all these rules updated and stuff. So it's a real messy thing. And for an industry where we don't even have enough people to fill the jobs that are open, it's a very disconnected from reality that the businesses face whenever they're trying to deliver their software. So I like how Rich Mogul says a large percentage of the companies in the expo floor will not be here in 5 years. He said this at RSA 2017. So I think that's really important. And we see that the world has changed. I for one, like the new OSI model. This is a lot easier for me to remember. I always got confused in the old one. So remembering we are kind of consuming software and services everywhere we look. And we look at things like serverless, and we see where this is sort of changing the footprint of and the attack surface of applications. And the definition of serverless, if you'll kind of, excuse kind of some of the asterisks and kind of the things here, but it says serverless encourages functions as deploy units and run as one-time read-only containers, coupled with third-party services that allow running end-to-end applications without worrying about system operation. And, there's some bits in there that aren't 100% true, but, if you kind of can stick with that, like it's mostly true, right? And security is moving people from or serverless is moving people from where they were spending so much money and having so much waste and incurring all this waste. And this is our evolution from hardware to serverless, where VMs kind of got us closer, and now serverless, we're just consuming and paying for the compute that we actually use, or the usage that we're actually that we need for our actual application. So we're tying performance and function to compute, which is really a really great place to be. And it also shifts our story. So now we're no longer thinking about doing security at all the different inheritance layers. There's still pieces of that for sure in the libraries and stuff you pull in. But what about at the application security layer? Like, that's where most of the stuff moves, right? Like you're sort of trusting the provider to provide a lot of the other type of things. And I remember whenever we first started talking about rugged, it's been many years now, but how security kind of has all this like cost and negativity, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's kind of toxic in a lot of organizations, to where you start thinking about things like rugged, or kind of some of the DevSecOps language that we use nowadays is like, it's a verification of quality, it's showing known benefits, it's very positive, it's affirming. And so I really think DevOps is the kind of the new way for security. It's the traveling companion for security, and it might just be the only way for security to manage to survive pretty well. The State of the DevOps report from 2016 says high performers spend 50% less time remediating security issues than low performers. High-performing organizations achieve quality by incorporating security and security teams into the overall delivery process. So this leads us to the new path, and I want to spend the next half of the talk just sort of going through what I think is the old way and the new way, and give you some ideas for some places to look for some more ideas as you kind of go through this. And we'll break these down one by one as we go. So there's the old path and new path. So let's start. First one is embrace secrecy. The new one is create feedback loops. So Rich Smith, former director of security over at Etsy, says a security team who embraces openness about what it does and why spreads understanding. And I think runtime is one of the most important places to create feedback loops. And this is detecting not just like OWASP top 10 stuff, but also things that really matter. So account takeover attempts, or parts or portions of your site that are under attack, to give you understanding about the payloads people are trying to use against you. What are the most likely vectors of attacks? Anything that's sensitive to your application that could be misused or abused. Any business logic, those would all fit in that place, right? So, oh sweet. Hopefully my animated GIF. This is my only one, I promise, but this is kind of the state of the industry right now, because most people can't even answer the question of like, are you under attack right now? Where are you under attack? And this is apologies for the Signal Sciences screenshots in here, but I feel like we have a good product to kind of show this value proposition here. But old ways, looking at logs or Splunk or whatever to try to figure out and do some sort of analysis through post-event type analysis, and say like, okay, people were trying to attack us, or we may have blocked it, may not have, we don't know. Where Signal Sciences is doing kind of real-time monitoring and is able to detect and stop attacks as they're coming in. So here we see like we have OWASP type stuff, but we have different types of scanners that are coming in, and this is just a small screenshot of our stuff, but we do all that account takeover, abuse, and misuse stuff as well. But and I had this slide that was in my RSA conference deck, and I thought I would just put this in here. So as you're looking at this part of the pipeline, and you're looking at like, how do I add a feedback loop for my operation runtime, and I want to move it back to the developers or to operations and security folks, like you can add runtime defense tooling. So you can do something like, if you need to do something open source, you don't have any money or whatever, like that's fine, like mod security and the ELK stack, and that gives you some application insight monitoring. If you can do paid, you can do something like Signal Sciences for like a next-gen WAF or RASP option. There's also contrast or brevity. But one thing that I think is like good to avoid in the modern world of development is like we spent a decent amount of time, and I have this blog article I wrote that I should link in here, but it's called "Oops, I waffed my cache." We kind of had this kind of ill-conceived notion of taking our web application firewall and application security defense solution and then putting it all the way up in the CDN tier. And there's a number of reasons that's bad. I won't get into them here, but if you find yourself doing that, like you should really kind of reconsider that. Most people are kind of pulling that level of defense closer and closer to the applications. So that's when people talk about RASP or next generation web application firewall, that's exactly what they're talking about. Okay, second piece here is just pass audit. So we used to think like, let's just get this thing done, but what if compliance could actually add value? And so that's the new way. Compliance can add value. So make sure you understand auditors. I won't go through all this, but PCI and all the frameworks, they're reasonably good, but you just got to decouple all the waterfall bits, and you got to find auditors that are able to work with you on that. The Agile Application Security book has a great chapter on this, a great couple of chapters on this, and can be really helpful for you, especially if you're kind of going to bat with some auditors or trying to figure out how to approach this. But deploys can be treated as standard or routine changes that have been pre-approved by management and that don't require any heavyweight change review meetings. So that's a very helpful concept. I think separation of duties is this thing that we've always kind of built in. We're not launching nukes, right? Like we're making software changes, something that's and competent people who wrote the software are making the changes. So I think as we put all this separation of duties into place, like you should really think about considering that harmful in your organization and look for ways to like automate code reviews, automate pushes, kind of build these standardized pipelines that are accepted by audit. If you have any questions on this or you need some help on this, I have 3 resources for you. So one is this, it's kind of older now, but still useful for developers with access to production, Oh My, blog post. There's the DevOps Audit Defense Toolkit, which is a great 20-page write-up and how to work with auditors and kind of adopting DevOps practices. And then there's a new resource we just started working on here in April called Dear Auditor, and it's available over at dearauditor.org. And it's a love letter from a DevOps to audit and making some new promises. And there's a controls matrix and framework that sort of speaks the language of auditors and DevOps at the same time. And so our real hope is to continue to build this out. I'm working with TopoPal and some other folks that's on there. So it was a really, really fun group. So check that out. It's over in GitHub, but you can start just at dearauditor.org. All right, so the next one is enforce stability is the old way, and the new way is create chaos. So we saw that Netflix stole the hearts and minds of everybody with the Chaos Monkey. There's the Antifragile book. Michael Nygaard's Release It book has a great couple of chapters on chaos engineering, so highly recommend that. Aaron Reinhardt's a great person to follow in this. He's doing tons of research in the chaos area, and he has the Chaos SLINGR project, which is really quite excellent as well. It adds misconfig to the stacks. It does chaos experiments. It runs as a serverless Lambda, so that's definitely worth checking out and kind of getting involved in that community. And I'm seeing more chaos engineering and security kind of overlaps like pop up, and we're going to continue to see more of this because it helps people think not just about security as something that is a detractor, but this is something that adds value, right? I'm able to withstand it. I'm able to detect something. I'm able to kind of survive an attack, whether it's malicious or not, right? So anyway, so there's a bunch of pieces to this, but I would highly recommend for just a primer on this, Nygaard's Release It book. There's a couple chapters on chaos, and that's really good place to start. I think another place where we add chaos or where we are kind of injecting some instability to the system is bug bounties. So I find if you're not doing this, there's some great companies out there. You can roll your own, or like HackerOne or BugCrowd, and those are some good options for you. But we're already being pen tested on the internet, and this allows kind of helping bring those people and giving them some reward type benefit out of doing that. So. Old path versus new path. The next one here is build a wall versus zero trust networks. So the ACL has moved to the network application or the application layer. Great book on this is Zero Trust Networks. So you just sort of assume compromise at all layers. Google has the BeyondCorp stuff, so that's really helpful as well. Wendy Nather came on the Modern Security series, which we host over at Signal Sciences, and she talked about this. If you're interested in it, this link has a recording on it, and it was a really great time. Okay, next one is slow validation and versus fast and non-blocking. So, fast and non-blocking, we don't want to slow down delivery. We want to sit inside the pipeline, sometimes maybe on the side of the pipeline. Maybe we do penetration testing at like a different cadence, but we still do it so regular that it's really helpful. Signal Sciences, we do about 15 deploys a day. So we're about 10,000, maybe even 12,000 deploys now in the last 2.5, 3 years. It all started, I read the book by Jez Humble and David Farley, and said, okay, well, how do we build this out so that we can deploy as little at a time as we can? And we try to optimize for overall cycle time from code commit to running in production, and that was kind of our impetus there. We gave power for everybody in the team to do their own deploys, and yet we're also a security company, and so that is something that we really needed to focus on and think about. And we needed security to be part of our overall CI/CD type approach. So we do this through lots of different places, and I think of the pipeline in these phases. You may have different words to describe it, but I like kind of honing in on these 3 areas. So like, what have I bundled into my application that's leaving me vulnerable or that I don't even know that I have there? For build, do I have build acceptance tests and integration tests that catch security issues before release? And operationally, am I being attacked right now? Is it working? I kind of talked about that in a little bit already. So, okay, let's move on. I got a couple more, and then I know I'm running low on time here, so I'm trying to kick it into fast mode here. So, certainty testing versus adversity testing. Shannon Leitz has a great stuff that she talks about doing pen testing over at Intuit, so definitely check that out when you get a chance. Over at Gauntlet, we have a thing where the Gauntlet's an open source testing project, but we use this phrase, be mean to your code. And there's a quote in here about how we should always be able to do this from the Agile Application Security book. But security tools are really difficult to use. They're always really noisy. And we needed a method for collaboration between devs and ops and security engineers. There needed to be a language that was able to span all 3 groups and kind of merge them all together. That's the genesis of Gauntlet. That's how Gauntlet came about. We wanted something that could be written in a natural language that developers, security, and operations could all understand. It wraps security testing tools, but it didn't necessarily install them. It doesn't install them. It's built to be a part of your CI/CD pipeline, and it's also open source and MIT licensed, so anybody can use that and take part in that. Simple Gauntlet test here. You describe your feature. If you're familiar with like Cucumber or any of the BDD tools, it's very similar to that. You have a scenario. So using this attack tool, Arachne, I'm looking for cross-site scripting, and I'm verifying no issues are found. So I have this given, when, then language. And you don't have to be a security expert to read this, right? You don't have to be, really knowledgeable about the entire code base of as a developer, or the operations team doesn't really have to like know all the ins and outs of this. They can kind of read this in a natural language, and they may not understand, like different people may not understand certain lines, but just because I don't know what this Arachne statement with different flags and stuff with it, I don't know what that means. I do understand that the output should contain 0 issues, and that's a passing test. So the idea is, as code makes its way through your pipeline, it's tested by the different things. Aaron Reinhardt, a good friend of mine, is a real big proponent of it. He says they really used Gauntlet to help bootstrap their DevSecOps initiative over at United Healthcare. I have a workshop where we kind of dig into this. And if you want the links for that, I'll kind of skip through some of these pieces here. But you can use Gauntlet in a Docker container. We have links for that as well. Let's see. Okay, then let's kind of get through the last bits here. So this slide is from Shannon Leitz's talk over at DevOps Days Austin in 2016. And I really like the way she breaks down the deployment phases here and kind of the different questions to ask in this. I recently gave a talk that sort of expands on the CI/CD pipeline and how security fits in all those phases, if you're interested in that. And it breaks it down into 5 stages, and we kind of look at those different places. So things like where you inherit code. So like this is your real line of code count. So for the Sonatype and Nexus, like this is, people are really interested, or people are real understandable of this type of thing, like having a bill of materials and things like that. So we'll kind of move on. Sometimes we forget about kind of container security. I know we've already had a lot of container things built into this, into the day already, but there's a great talk about a year ago by Gareth Rushgrove, that's what's inside that container. And, we still see like high priority security vulnerabilities in Docker containers. The last bit is whether being process driven or having the paved road mentality. I like how Jason Chan over at Netflix says this. He says, make it easy for people to do the right thing. And so if people kind of participate in what's known as the paved road, they get security stuff for free. So they use gold images, they have blessed build-ins dependencies. And it really gets down into the core of this. Like, security needs to learn not to be a blocker, but be an enabler of the business. You do this by showing, having empathy for other folks, having enablement, try to be fast and non-blocking, not slowing delivery, put security testing in every phase, kind of like we were talking about in the previous panel. And really, like, we're trying to make security normal throughout the business. And I think that's a big step from the right direction for us. So if you'd like a copy of the slides, or if there's any way else that I can help you, please feel free to email me, james@signalsciences.com. And I think I'm good on time. So I think I'm done on this. So thanks. And I know that was a lot of slides, and I apologize for that, but I hope you enjoyed and really appreciate having you here today.
Yeah, James, excellent as always. Thank you very much. And yeah, you were on time, even though we're going to break. We have a couple of minutes before Shannon Leitz is up next, if I have read the schedule right. So giving Shannon some shout outs so far. I know she's on Slack.
You definitely I saw that and I was like, I get to warm up for Shannon, so that's good. Like, you definitely want to definitely want to stick aurand for Shannon's talk. Let me just say that you definitely want to stick around for that.
And Damon Edwards up after her, so
Damon, no, definitely Damon as well. Like, Damon's. I watch Damon's talks all the time, and I'm like, man, I feel like way smarter than I was before, but man, I have a long way to go to get to Damon status. So it's great. Like, you always learn something.
Presentations. So the only person I know that I'm like, there are 100 slides in this deck, and you only have a half an hour, but James has a way for those of us with short attention spans and fast reading to keep up. I know you're going to make the slides available. Can you drop them on the Slack channel? I will. Yep. For us, I posted. So I think it's at least the second mention of Nygaard's book, the second edition. Yeah. The second edition is great because it has that expanded chapters on chaos engineering, and he kind of moves some of the other stuff. So I think that's it's really worth picking up the second edition. And he still keeps all the same stuff from the first edition, like circuit breaker patterns and stuff like that. Yeah, I have the first edition, but I don't have the second one. So now it's on my Amazon cart. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you as well for jumping into our panel discussion earlier. So you did 2 sessions in a day. I think we're on a webinar together next week. That's right. That's right. Next week. So I'm going to take a couple days of vacation in between, but I'll look forward to chatting with you and Kevin next week as well. Yep, that's going to be great. Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the DevSecOps report, and I'll put a link to that if people are interested in kind of checking that out as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'll be good. So we can get more people there on this conversation. That's right. Yeah. With that, this channel is, we're going to stop broadcasting on this channel. We're going to go to Shannon Leitz on the new channel. So for those of you watching online, check Schedge. You'll have the link to the next session that should be up and running soon if it's not already. And James, thanks as always. We'll see you again soon. All right. Sounds good. Bye. Thanks, y'all.